Welcome to Reflections, a program where we discuss values and virtues for the transformation of the individual and the society in general. I am Father George Ihusani, and I have my friend in the studio, Dr. Anthony Okerigbe. You're welcome.
Thank you, Father.
Dr. Anthony Okerigbe is an old friend. He's a senior lecturer at the University of Lagos Department of Philosophy, and he also heads a unit, Diaspora Studies or something.
In the Institute of African and Diaspora Studies.
Institute of African and Diaspora Studies.
I'm a principal investigator and a researcher.
Great. And you're not only a researcher about diaspora studies, you are also a researcher. You have done some research on Luxterra trauma healing. Tell our viewers about it.
You can include that in my CV. Yeah, that is very interesting because it has expanded my intellectual horizon. Because from my incursion into African studies, I've been able to delve into the African predicament. And one of the things I can table as the African predicament is the mental state of the African arising from the traumatic situation they experience. Multifarious traumatic situation that the Africans and even Nigerians encounter. As a matter of fact, one author and journalist captured it when she was doing her own research on the mental health of Nigerians by saying that Nigeria is a gigantic trauma chamber.
Trauma chamber?
Yes. And I made a presentation to that effect last week when at the African Institute of African and Diaspora Studies, when we had the workshop on something relating to the African predicament too. And so it has expanded my horizon, as I said, because I've been able to ask questions beyond mere regurgitation of philosophies of dead men. We have been able to apply the principles, the submission and the theorizings of these men, these great minds, to interrogate the African situation. So I'm eternally grateful to Luxterra for that opportunity, and that has somehow pushed my research
in that direction.
In that direction. So I'm a principal investigator under Lenin at the Institute of African and Diaspora Studies. In fact, we got a grant in that institute to which we call the African Cluster Center of Excellence of the University of Bayreuth in Germany. So I'm a principal investigator and the lead researcher of the section on Lenin. So it is providential that these things are happening about the same time, getting into Luxterra and being open to this psychotrauma healing course and session, and it has afforded me opportunity.
What is the dimension of University of Edinburgh in this?
Okay, University of Edinburgh. Oh, okay, that was I am a Catalyst Fellow. Yeah, I got a grant in 2002 grants. First of all, in 2019 to attend the conference.
Yes.
And secondly, there was a competed grant, a grant competed for among all the Catalyst Fellows to do a small research. Just pick any research of your choice. And I was so fascinated by my exposure to the psychotrauma healing course provided by Luxterra. So I decided to investigate and see the methodology of this psychotrauma healing and how it can help and ameliorate our situation in Nigeria, especially cases of trauma intolerance, even child abuse, and then conflict in family. So I've pieced all this together, and that is what I'm interrogating, and trying to understand how this methodology can be replicated in other spheres.
Father Richard came back, and we attended a webinar on mental health, this Mashi, Professor Gaga said.
Okay.
And Father Richard made a submission. His submission, and he's writing a scholarly paper on it, that in Nigeria, we shouldn't be talking of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, that Nigeria is undergoing ongoing trauma syndrome.
Wow.
It's not a trauma that has passed, that you are talking of the disorders after the past trauma. He says trauma in Nigeria is an ever-going phenomenon, ongoing phenomenon.
So what it means is that you have flashbacks and there's also repetition of trauma.
You are still in the trauma.
Okay.
I mean, you cannot be talking of post-trauma disorder when, let's say, the person that is beating you is still beating you. The person that is raping you is still raping you.
Whoa.
The bandits that are scaring you are still there and scaring you. So he says that what we are suffering in Nigeria is not post-traumatic stress disorder, but that it is ongoing trauma disorder. Ongoing. And I began to think that this is serious. So that's it relates with what you say about about trauma chamber.
Yes, a journalist and investigative reporter, I want to mention her name here, Tobore Ovore, who worked with me at The Guardian. And she's a well-known researcher in this area and also an investigative reporter. And in her research, participant observation, she came to the conclusion that Nigeria is a gigantic trauma chamber.
I mean, that's another way of putting what Richard is saying, that the trauma is not something over, that we are having.
We are immersed in it.
We are immersed in it. And it is ongoing. The fact that you cannot just take your car and drive from here to Kaduna without fear of death and fear of kidnap. The fact that people cannot get up and go to their farms in most of the Northwest and Northeast and Middle Belt. That even to go to farm to harvest your products or to plant, it's ongoing trauma.
In fact, in my presentation last week, I also made known the fact that it is not the circumstances that are also traumatic. Even hearing the news
every day,
seeing the graphic details being depicted in the media, photo, what they call the social media, WhatsApp and co, somehow puts you in that state of eternal traumatization. So the exposure to the graphic details from pictures, from videos, and the fact that we are also gradually desensitized makes this situation very, very worrisome. So it is not just the circumstances, the incidents, the bandits kidnapping people, hearing the news, seeing the gory picture.
With the regards to trauma, we are either direct victims of trauma or witnesses of trauma, or those who hear the stories of trauma. We are all affected. So we are either direct or indirect victims of trauma, simply waking up each day and listening to news analysis, whether it is in AIT or channels or Arise or whatever, or even simply glancing through newspaper reviews. Because the headlines of the newspapers themselves are traumatizing.
Father, what is worrisome to me is the desensitization. In Guardian, when I was at the features desk of the Guardian, and you have the headline, some headline like 7 die on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway.
It's chilling. It's chilling.
It's chilling. There's the remorse, the pain you feel. But now you are so desensitized that a whole village, family raped, a hometown of prominent Nigerians,
and then
devastated.
There were even some unconscionable newspaper editors will now have 20 roasted to death.
That kind of the language. So
the
rhetorics and language of information dissemination is also a source of trauma. You see, roasted is a terrible. It's a culinary category.
Or crushed to death.
So that's mechanics. The mechanics of crushing, of roasting.
So what it does is that immediately it transfers the pain to me reading it.
Yes, definitely, Father. So that is it. So I'm not only transferring the pain, my worry is the fact that people are somehow going beyond the pain and absorbing it as a normal life. So that is what I mean by desensitization.
That is very,
so
very
there's
bad.
no feeling at all.
Pope Francis, one of the first statements of Pope Francis when he became Pope in 2013 is what he calls the globalization of insensitivity. Globalization of insensitivity. That when the lack of compassion, the lack of sensitivity to the pain of others becomes global, when the pain of people, this is what he made that statement when he went to Lampedusa. And it is about African migrants that were perishing at sea, and how the world is moving on without care, insensitivity.
So what this does to me is that there is a gradual devaluation of the human person.
Of course.
So that position of man being an image of God, being an imago Dei, that inviolability,
of the human
that
person.
intrinsic worth of the human person is grossly undermined, or completely obliterated with this kind of sense.
It is undermined by language. The choice of
words of terms,
to capture the event. So the same event can be captured in a humanistic way, in a compassionate way, or it can be carelessly captured. I mean, I remember at The Guardian, it is an editorial policy. Clearly, you never put gory images in The Guardian. Thank God. But there are papers that put those gory pictures in colors, painfully. I won't call their name, but the point is that a lot of people do not know what harm they are doing, whether it is on TV or newspapers. When you put the gory details, what harm you are doing, increasing the trauma in the population. So that it is no longer just the immediate family that has suffered the loss, but you have extended it to others, and you are forcing them to take in. And you are saying, what you are saying now is that the long-term consequence is desensitization.
Desensitization.
The word is numbing.
Numbing, yes, that is the word.
Numbing. So people no longer feel.
Yes. So, and it affects the whole idea of fellow feeling. So there's no longer fellow feeling. So people, and that itself aggravates this tendency of atomization in society. Already the human society, from this progression in world history has tended towards atomization. Me, myself, and I, myself and my family.
It's not just atomization in the society, meaning you separate yourself from our traditional African communalism. It is even atomization of the individual. So we are talking of the human being as if it's just a collocation of cells. We are not including his soul, his spirit, his emotion.
Definitely.
So you are atomizing the individual versus the society. See? You are atomizing
the self-alienation.
Yes.
Self-alienation. And that for me is very dangerous. It's dangerous because it affects socialization. And the long-term effect again is on civilization. So how does it affect socialization? Now, the great theologian and philosopher, Thomas Aquinas, tells us that it is, let me quote it in Latin, inclinatio naturale, quod homo societate vivat.
It is a natural inclination for human beings to become social.
To live in society.
Yes.
Yeah, that is it. Now, that tendency to live in society is grossly undermined by this desensitization and numbing, and this self-annihilation and atomization. Because you cannot attain that civilization of love for which we are created as human beings. That is mixed. That point is
right now, Tony, right now, what has been happening in our society in the last few years and aggravated in the last 1 month with the escapades, the violent escapades of kidnappers and bandits and headsmen and so on and so forth. What it is, the long-term consequences in terms of how people react to ongoing trauma, it can only be imagined. It can only be imagined.
Definitely.
We are getting to a stage, aren't we, where you can almost say that very few, if any, Nigerians are well mentally. Very few, if any, Nigerians have what you would call optimal mental
sanity, mental wellness.
Mental wellness.
Yeah. I raised that also at the presentation, and a lecturer of ethics, moral philosophy, took me on. I was asking me if we, as I repeat, because I repeated this, I stated that because of the convolution of multiple forms of trauma,
yes,
or traumatic experiences, we are all in that same cauldron.
Yes.
So he asked the question, if we are in this gigantic trauma chamber, how do we extricate ourselves?
If we are in this gigantic trauma chamber. Now, actually, how do we extricate ourselves? We may need external support.
Yeah.
We Christians say, in God we trust. And when the children of Israel were in the gigantic trauma chamber in Egypt, a Moses needed to be sent to them. Moses was extracted from the same society, but Moses had a privileged upbringing. And Moses saw, the Lord opened the eyes of Moses to see what he could do, and the Lord sent him. So we need, the people need some liberators. Because if we say, how do we educate ourselves? Well, the mere fact that we have been in this and we continue to be in it shows that indeed it may be because we can't help ourselves.
Okay, mine was to respond then by stating that the recognition of the fact that we're in this situation is already a way towards the solution.
And that's what I'm saying.
And we recognizing that we have shared suffering, shared predicament, shared mental unwellness, will create the kind of bonds.
That is what is called in psychology awareness.
So it will create the kind of bond for us to bring about solution.
Good. So what you are saying, if I understand well, is to say that, look, in mental psychological healthcare, to achieve awareness is already a great step. The people who are in psychiatric homes and are chained to the bed, chained to whatever, because they do not know there's anything wrong with them. But once people get to know that there is something wrong with them and are on their own asking for medicine, we call that awareness. A high level of awareness, meaning this person is aware that I am sick and I need a doctor, I need a counselor, I need a clinician, and is accepting medicine or accepting counseling. Not everybody in this trauma chamber that we are in recognizes that. In fact, the overwhelming majority of Nigerians do not know they are traumatized.
They are living in denial for them.
No, they are living in a state of blindness, darkness, unawareness. So it is only a few people who would recognize that we are in trouble. There are people who think that this is the best of times. The hush puppies, for example, who are definitely sick, but who do not know that they are sick. Right? They are doing their Yahoo, and they think that's wonderful. And they are buying their Lamborghinis and their Porsche cars and their whatever, Rolls Royce, and they are posing by 2 Rolls Royce and but this is evidence of sickness, of mental illness.
Megalomania.
This is mental illness. Now, but there are people, and society will never be devoid of such people who recognize that this is mental illness. When I see people drive on our streets and see that you see 3 lanes and people come and form a 4th and 5th lane and everything is blocked, this is evidence of mental illness. When you see people living in an estate and then their level of noise, and then they are doing parties and 20 houses away, you can hear the music that somebody is playing in his house. Come on, this is evidence of mental illness. But not everybody will recognize it. Those who recognize it now need to, as you say, appreciation of shared suffering coming together to form a network and beginning to do something about it. And the group put together by Professor Igaga, MASHI, Mental Health Help Initiative.
Yes.
That's awareness, right? And we recognize that we are not well. Let us see how we can help one another. Luke Stera, setting up the trauma healing. That's awareness.
I think there's another one in Lagos. I've forgotten the name.
That's awareness. So there are a number of people, and what we now need is some network group that will bring all these initiatives together
as a coalition.
And then begin to say, okay, since we all recognize this now, what kind of advocacy programs can we have to get the leadership? The leadership who, by the way, themselves are sick. Because if the leaders were not sick, we won't be where we are. Right? Sure. I mean, we have an ongoing situation where resident doctors are on strike. And we leave that and leaders jet out to other countries for healthcare.
For healthcare.
That is a situation of sickness. That's a situation of sickness.
It is.
We have a situation where the leaders of this society abandon their education, the education of their children, and then send their own children and ward overseas for school. That's a situation of mental illness. People, Europeans, they explored other territories in the world, harvested their resources to develop their society. That is the normal human inclination, to go out and harvest resources from outside to come and develop your society. But on account of the mental illness in this society, what do our leaders do? They harvest the resources of this society
and then take it
out to Switzerland, to UK to develop those societies. Tell me, is that... So, Tony, your research work is plenty. You have a lot of work to do.
It is. And we will just hope that a coalition will be formed in such a manner that people in leadership position will come to realize the sickness, their ailment, and then try to push out policies that will help us, that will extricate us from this cauldron we have found ourselves. So we just pray that something like that happens. And
but people like you who are in research, therefore, have a lot of responsibility in this. People like you mentioned, an investigative journalist.
Yes, Tobore.
Yeah, Tobore. We need to get such people to constantly put before society the truth of our illness, the truth of our cognitive dissonance. You see, we need a lot more of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, for people to know that we are not well. Even my people in the studio, they are not, to recognize that they are not very well. These camera people, to recognize that they are not well. Because they are part of this chamber. They are in this chamber of trauma.
Yes.
Or do you think you people are very well? So for every one of us to recognize that the level of trauma in the society, even the news we hear every day, those things that our young people share on social media every day, to be able to forward those gory pictures and those stories, it's not evidence of mental wellness. So I challenge you, Dr. Kaigama, to go back to the university and gather your people, and you can do it inter-university collaboration to do more research on this and confront people and challenge the people you have in the newspaper, so that there can be an ongoing series of editorials, series of features covering, to let Nigerians know that we are indeed in trouble, and that we need to do something about mental health.
Yeah. Father, this is a very profound one you just stated now. But one of the impediments to all this, I observe, is the thinking that channeling your energy towards mental health is not worth its salt. Because people are grappling with survival, grappling with getting their daily bread. So, in other words, the concern is this: why would I have to spend my time doing something that is intangible?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, very clearly, and that is part of the reason why even we who are doing the training of healers, training of people to offer counseling support, we have a problem getting funding. Because people do not recognize the place of mental health. It is easier to collect money to buy blankets and buy bread and buy rice and so on and distribute than to raise funds for research in mental health.
That is it.
It is intangible. However, that's part of the reason why Africa is poor. That's part of the reason why Nigeria is poor. That we really need to get into the kind of foundations that Europe and America had before they began to make riches like this. If we keep getting concerned with daily bread and butter, what we are to eat today, we will never make progress.
Never.
And on that note, I would like us to bring this discussion to an end. I have been discussing with Dr. Anthony Okereke of the Department of Philosophy, University of Lagos, about the gigantic trauma chamber that we all find ourselves in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Father.